I am K. Sreenivasan, having around 38 years of experience in automotive, aerospace, toy, manufacturing industries, basically. So today we are going to learn about aerospace standard. Before that, I just want to have the understanding from the people in the chat box. You're able to hear me loud and clear. Can you give me a thumbs up? Thank you. So we'll wait for a few more minutes so that if any participant is joining, we can wait and then straight away start with the program. If you have any questions, you can actually put in the chat box. We'll discuss at the end of the session so that the flow will not be stopped. Every questions will be answered, and this program is planned for an hour. So by 9 o'clock, basically, we'll wrap up the session. The objective of the program, I would like to be interactive. If we can always put in the chat box whatever questions you have so that it can be answered, right? Objective of this program, introduction to Aerospace Standard 9100 and its evolution, interpretation of the AS standard, additional requirements of 9100 standard, basically definition, differentiation between ISO 9001 and additional requirement with respect to aerospace, and understanding of each clause and its linkage to for implementation. All right. Why AS 9100? Basically, it's for the aerospace industry, for aviation, space, and defense. What happens here when you are in India and elsewhere, to understand in the same language, AS is used. That is globalization of the industry. An organization having challenge of purchasing products and services from external providers throughout the world at all levels of the supply chain, they understand in the same way. I mean, the language what we speak will be easily understood by any supply chain who actually purchases the product with respect to aerospace. Basically, it's driven by Airbus, Boeing, and defense. These are the three people who actually drive this and having the downstream supply chain. So external providers, they have the challenge in delivering products and services to make them understand in the same way this standard is used. Like ISO 9001, this is AS 9100, specific to aviation, space, and defense organization. AS is widely adopted standard quality management across aerospace industry. It was first released in 1999, then by industry bodies, including Society of Automotive Engineers. That's what actually it's evolved, right? Now it's part of Aerospace Defense and Industries Association of Europe, which is shortly called as ASD, aiming at global standard for aviation. And it is driven by Aerospace Quality Group, AIQG. It replaces the AS 9001, which was the current version of ISO 9001 standards. Previously, it was ISO 9000 standards, which is now fully replaced by AS 9000. And how it evolved. It started with AS 9000 in 1997, based on 9001 1994 standards. Then in 1999, it added 555 aerospace industry specific requirements. In 2001, when ISO 9000 2000 was revised, this was also revision A was released. Revision B in 2004, revision 3 in 2009, and current revision, which is D 2016. We'll further go deep dive in understanding each of the class. Before that, I just want to understand how many are you from automotive, how many are you from aerospace? Can you just put in the chat box so that we'll also have a rough idea of the participation level of the candidate, so that it will be much more helpful for understanding the group. Can you just automotive, right? Bandi is from automotive, aerospace, Nanguda, automotive, nice. Many are from automotive. That's absolutely okay. Up till now, you are able to follow me. Just give me a thumbs up, or you just put FM in the chat box. We'll go deep dive. But before that, I just want to understand whether my speed, voice, everything is clear. At least put clear in the chat box.
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir.
See, it is AS is not only one standard, it is associated with many standards. It basic standard, which mother of all standards, which is called as ISO 9001, where everyone is almost aware of. Then it is ISO 9101. It is the QMS, it's a specific standard wherein it is the QMS audit requirements are explicitly defined. It is used in conjunction with AS 9100. Then AS 9102, it is the first article inspection. Basically, when you produce a part and give it to your customer, before that you need to give the inspection with respect to first article, which is Form 1, and for Form 2, generally called as FAI, first article inspection. And AS 9103, which guides for the identification of the key characteristics and how it has to be managed to reduce the variation and mitigate the problem. It's almost a guidance of risk management. Then comes the AS 9145, similar to our automotive APQP, but here the requirement is actually for aerospace. And also we have the PPAP. Both are defined in AS 9145, where it is clearly explained what is the requirement with respect to aerospace and how it has to be implemented. Same 5 phases are there in that: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. and the requirement is more or less same, but it is only that what is aligned to the aerospace standard, wherein qualification of process is most predominantly used rather than the product. Process is more, the check on the process is more rather than the product. Then we have the supply chain risk management guidelines. This defines the upstream and downstream supply chain risk we need to identify and mitigate. And this will be a live document. Then we have ARP 5550 is nothing but the failure mode and effect analysis. It is for DFMEA as well as PFMEA. Then we have AS 55553E. It is basically for counterfeit electronic parts for detection, mitigation, and disposition that needs to be detected at source rather than after assembly or after reaching the customer. And NADCAP, it is a specific process qualification which is qualified for each process. For example, if in aerospace, if you are doing any heat treatment, then NADCAP approval will be given only for that heat treatment process, and the records, documentation, everything has to align with the requirement of that NADCAP standard, and that will be qualified and approved by NADCAP auditors. NADCAP auditors are also qualified with respect to that process. So this is the relationship between international standards on quality management and quality management system and their clauses of this international standard. When I say international standard, I'll just show you the example of the standard, what is there. We're able to see here. This is how the standards actually looks like. I only taken the gist of it and put it as a presentation, right? I'll be going a little fast in case any of you wanted me to slow down. I'll definitely pitch in and slow down. So these are the adapted reference standards which already I have discussed. This is in detail, wherein each one, what is the standard name and what is the application. Like specific ISO 10007, it speaks about the configuration management, which is very important in aerospace. I'm talking about this one. Here we also have a specific standard for selecting the QMS consultant. Guides, which guide choosing the competent QMS consultant with respect to implementation of AS in case you would like to go with a consultant. And whereas this ISO 19011 is audit management system, which is guideline for all standards, irrespective of automotive, aerospace, or 14,000, 45,000. This is the guiding standard, the last one. So why implement in an organization to get sustainable development initiatives? So whenever you implement this standard in conjunction with ISO 9001, we will be able to sustain and consistently provide products, enhance customer satisfaction. We can avoid the risk by addressing the risk, demonstrate conformity, and also we will be able to comply with the requirement of the international standard. And the process approach is used, which is PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. And the entire AS standard talks about risk-based thinking from class 1 to class 10, including scope. So what is the intent of this application of this standard? Intent is to design, develop, and provide aviation, space, and defense products and services, including post-delivery provision for maintenance of spare parts, material for their own products or services. That is the intended application of this standard. So basically, as I already told you, AS 9100 is the quality management system standard. AS 9110 is the for maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Basically, it's called as MRO. And AS 9120, it is for distributors. These are the three major standards wherein AS, Aerospace, Defense Organization, depending on their scope of supplies, needs to adapt. So these are the major differences basically with respect to ISO 9000 and 2008 and 2015. We will not go into the details. Basically, when there is a revision in ISO 9001, automatically the AS, the automotive, the 14,000, 45,000, every standards gets revised. Now we are going to get ISO 9001 2026, wherein after that each of these standards also will get revised. And like ISO 9001, here also we have the documented information and also retained documented information. When you say documented information, it is the mandatory document that needs to be available during the audit. And when I say retained documented information, it is the relative record in each class. And what is meant by class? It is nothing but the requirement which is defined in the standard. So interpretation of the standard. This is an example. For example, the first one from the standard, what it says, scope. There will be a scope defined. When it is in bold and italic, it is additional requirement for AS 9100 standard. Can everybody say additional requirement AD in the chat box? So that I will be able to understand that this point is actually understood by the participants. AD in the chat box. Can I get a AD? That is when it's bold and italic. That is the additional requirement in the AS standard. Thank you. So 4.4 quality management system and its process, it is from ISO 9001, whereas the organization quality management system shall also address customer and applicable statutory and regulatory quality management system requirement is the additional requirement of AS standard. This is how the interpretation is done in the standard. When you take the standard and read it, this is the requirement, AS requirement. This is the ISO 9001 requirement. So in any standard, including ISO 9001, shall indicates a mandatory requirement. Should, when it is mentioned, it indicates recommendation. May indicates it's a permission. Can indicates that it's a possibility or a capability. And when it's marked as note, it is a guidance for understanding or clarification in each of the clause. I have just summarized in which clause shall is there, should is there, may is there, can is there, note is there. Basically, when there is a requirement of shall, the rest of the parts is only a information, and for that clause, that requirement shall be demonstrated during the audit or the certification body or the customer. That's how it is interpreted. In the sense, when there is a shall requirement, it shall be demonstrated as per the requirement of the class, including ISO 9001 as well as additional AS. Then actually how it is implemented, it is based on the PDCA and risk-based thinking. And also there are 7 quality management principles as per the standard, which is customer focus, leadership, engagement of people, process approach, improvement, evidence, and relationship. Basically, you can always remember as C L P E I E R. This acronym I'm just telling. You can always remember based on that. CLEPIER. This is one of the methods what I remember. Already we have discussed about shall requirement, should requirement, may requirement. Basically, this is the process approach. This is shown as a pictorial form where there is an input, output, and what is the sources of input and what is the receiver of output. That's how it is defined in the standard. And what is plan, do, check, act is also defined in the standard. You can see here, basically, by clause it is defined. When I say clause 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are the auditable clauses, whereas 1, 2, 3, that is scope, normative deference, terms and definitions are for information or how it has to be implemented. Am I clear up till now? And everybody is able to follow me? Or should I slow down? Yes. Can you give me a thumbs up? I'm able to, everybody is able to follow me? Thank you. Thank you. So this is also in a pictorial form. It is nothing but ISO 9001 requirements. Additional is for international aviation, space and defense quality requirements. And what are those? Operational risk, product safety, special requirements, critical items, configuration management, on-time delivery, counterfeit parts, expanded requirements for production and external providers. Why I'm reading this specifically is, if you can remember this slide, you are more or less, you will be able to more or less understand and implement with respect to EAS 9100. These are the additional requirements wherein you will be able to, if you are able to understand, then you will be able to implement. Yeah, and right diagram PDCA clause is missing. One moment. Yes, we'll correct that. It's missing, right? So this is what I told: scope, normative reference, terms and definitions. And these are the critical terms and definitions in EAS standard. Counterfeit part, critical items, key characteristics, product safety, special requirements, and relationship. These are the critical definitions and the concise meaning which is given on the right side. So this is the comparison with respect to ISO 9000 requirement and EAS 9100 requirement. Basically, in every clause where there is italic and bold, that is the additional requirement. In some cases, there will be a new clause like 4.4.2, not present in ISO 9001. Yeah, acceptance authority media is the seal, which is a stamp which is required in each process. So with respect to coming back to 9001 additional requirement for class 4, you can just see, we will not go into the details of this. Basically, in class 4, 4.4.1, the organization has to have the statutory and regulatory requirement additional to 9001. Likewise, the sequence and interaction of operations has also to be addressed with respect to the aviation and defense requirement. Similarly, in clause 5, product and service conformity and on-time delivery performance to be monitored, 5.1.2. Left side, if you see, that is the ISO 9001 requirement. Right side, what you see is the additional requirement as per the aerospace standard 9100. Similarly, for class 5 and 6, we'll go to this only a summary of it. So this is for class 6 and 7, wherein left side is a ISO 9001 requirement, right side is the additional requirement. For class 6, we don't have any additional. For class 7, we have additional requirement of 7.1.52, where process for recall and equipment to be identified and procedure has to be there, including for test hardware, test software. Even if you have an automated test equipment, plotter, personally owned tools used for work, customer supplied equipment. All these needs to be addressed in your procedure to demonstrate that process for recall in case of any calibration failure is maintained. And what is the requirement as per the standard? There should be a equipment type, unique identification number, physical location, calibration or verification method, calibration frequency, acceptance criteria, and this register should be there during the audit, including traceability of the equipment. And it also needs to be considered for periodic review as per the requirement of the standard. In 7.3 awareness, whoever is working with respect to their process, they should be able to understand the relevant requirement of the product and also the documented information, whatever may be the procedure, the work instruction, it can be the procedure, it can be the work instruction, it can be the format. In whatever they work, they must be aware of it. That's one of the requirement. And they also need to understand what is their role that contributes to the product. In case of service, in MRO, they should know what is that their contribution in that process. And that should be demonstrated during the audit. They also need to know the impact in case of any issues with respect to the product and particularly safety. And also the behavior pattern also needs to be checked and demonstrated for any ethical issues. This is across the organization. The standard says not only for the person who is working, it is from incoming to FG. The entire process, whoever handles, the behavior has to be ethical and needs to be demonstrated. Same 7.4 communication, left side is the ISO 9001, right side is the additional requirements. So communication should be not only giving, it should be received, and that should be demonstrated. In case of internal feedback, for example, employee audit, inspection, external feedback, customer, supplier, regulator, that needs to be demonstrated. Same way for 7.5.2, same way for 7.5.3. Here in 7.5.3, the obsolete document must be clearly identified, removed, and controlled to prevent unintended use. In the sense, if you have a document which is already having a revision, that needs to be removed from the point of use, and that needs to be demonstrated that it is being removed. Why? To ensure that the document is not used and product what is produced is not having the configuration which is not as per the requirement of the customer. Here basically what is talked about the configuration management, wherein we have two revisions running parallelly, and the configuration management has to be managed, and if it is obsolete, it has to be removed. So if you see in aerospace standard, the 8th class is having more requirements, wherein the product is getting produced, and that needs to be demonstrated in each and every production process, including the supplier. Like you have 8.1 to 8.7 ISO 9001. For each clause, there is a requirement which is elaborated. For example, in 8.1A, we need to consider safety, producibility, inspectability, reliability, availability, maintainability, including the embedded software if you are using for products as well as service. And the risks of the above has to be evaluated, including product obsolescence. During the process, even product safety, personal safety, and also consistency needs to be demonstrated. And this has to be done to the entire product life cycle, including recycling and final disposition, which is end of life. For automotive, it is end of life. Is the car here? The end of the life is the aircraft, wherein we need to ensure that end of life is also considered. That will be done by the OEM. But in case you are doing a part or product, we need to consider the risk, how it will be disposed of. Similarly, in 8.1 B and C, we need to demonstrate statistically design verification, process control, key characteristics, everything where possible, it needs to be demonstrated according to the statistical control requirements. For example, in aerospace, it is almost all parts are inspected 100%. Do you agree? Where unless otherwise agreed by customer, you need to go for sampling, and there you need to demonstrate according to the customer requirement, CPK of 1.33 or 1.61, depending on the parameter. Can I get a feedback on this? Everybody already in automobile, there are some people from aerospace, whether they are doing 100%, and in case you are doing any sampling method, that needs approval from the customer. Actually, it needs. I'm just asking a question to the group. Yeah, Abdul Aziz, Abdul says, yes, it is required. So that is one of the requirements. Other thing is that you also need to meet the timeline of delivery of products and services. That also needs to be monitored, and that is the requirement of the standard. As you see in 8.1, there are a lot of requirements which is given in A, B, C, D, E, F, up to J. Each one of the requirement is defined clearly, and that needs to be demonstrated during the third party or customer audit to ensure that the product is as per the print requirement of the customer. Why it is like this? To ensure the product what is given to the tier 1 or your upstream customer, the process is set in such a way is followed as per the agreement. What is the agreement? Which is the FAA, first article inspection approval, and that needs to be flowed down in each of the production processes. That's why in clause 8, the entire thing is elaborated in aerospace standard. The entire clause 8 operation is having many additional requirements to ensure that the process or services conforms to the product requirements as per print or as per agreement. One more critical clause in 8.1 is work transfer. Can anyone say what is work transfer in the group? What is work transfer? It is nothing but the change management. When you change it, either the mission location, the supplier, that has to follow the change management principle. You have to establish, maintain, implement first the temporary control and permanent. In the sense, how is that you are going to manage already a running process for the change which you are trying to implement, and then also ensure that after implementation, how it's going to be controlled. The risk needs to be identified before change, and where applicable, you need to inform the customer. This is not only in case you're working in an organization and you have a supplier. This applies to supplier also, as well as your own organization where the product is or service is being done, where product is produced or service is being done. Are we clear till now? Can I get all clear in the chat box? AL from the participants. Thank you. Thank you so much. So again, 8.1.1 continues with respect to operation risk. That is, we need to plan, implement, control formal process for managing operation risk affecting the achievement of requirement. What is here achievement of requirement is nothing but the requirement of the customer with respect to the print or product or subassembly or whichever. Exactly. Transfer to be planned, controlled, and verified. Exactly. Good. Basically, here, when you say operation risk, the risk needs to be identified and have the mitigation plan. In case you are not able to mitigate, at least identify what is the risk and ensure that that risk does not get escalated and it is having the threshold level. That is what the standard says. It should be identified and kept in case you are not able to mitigate, but it is still okay to have a residual risk. that remain after mitigation within the defined acceptable limits. That's what the standard says. Then the important requirement in aerospace is the 8.1.2 configuration management. In aerospace, what happens is they will have a revision A, revision B, revision C. Maybe all the three are running in concurrent due to validation purpose. So the configuration management has to be maintained not only in the engineering during process. The entire process during the production, the configuration need to be maintained and it has to be identified, it has to be traced, it has to be documented, and there should be no mismatches between the document and the configuration to ensure accuracy and compliance. This is the requirement of the standard. Here, when I say configuration management, it is not only the drawing, it also includes the qualification standards, what is given by the prime or your customer. When I say qualification standard, for example, in assembly, they would have defined this is the method of assembly, this is the screw has to be used, this is where the screw has to be fixed, this is the torque requirement. Everything has to be qualified and that configuration needs to be maintained. Similarly, in case of a special process, there also configuration has to be maintained. When I say configuration, even the qualification, if there is a change, that change has to be identified and documented, traced, including the seal of the person who was actually doing the operations to that level. Like one of them told, right? EAM requirement, acceptance authority media. So even in a configuration management, it is a basic requirement. In a configuration requirement, should be additionally ensured by the product manufacturer or the service provider that configuration management is maintained. The wrong configuration part does not reach the customer. That is the requirement of the standard. Here, product safety, basically that is again, this is the print requirement. In case in the drawing, there is a product safety symbol provided and agreed by you and the customer that needs to be ensured by identifying risk. Then any safety events to be communicated. What is the evidence we check during audit of configuration? It's basically the revision with respect to what the part is produced and what is available in the master. During the configuration audit, for example, you are producing a product of revision B. So whether the revision B document is flown down to the process and the same part is being produced with the same dimensions or parameter, and the same is flown down to the all the process, like your incoming, your in process, your final, your packing, whether the configuration is actually maintained as per the, what is the meaning of demonstration? It is nothing but, for example, I'll tell you a real life example. I was born in 1968. How do you demonstrate? You have a birth certificate. In case of aerospace, in a real-time example, it is the record, documented evidence of documented information that this part has been produced in this machine, in this parameter, with the requirement of this drawing, and it has been checked accordingly with respect to the requirement of drawing, and the dimensions or the parameter or the requirement is recorded and it is being stamped by the approved or the skillful person and is signed by the authority on the day of production. That's what I'm just telling as a demonstration. Anywhere I'm using the word demonstration, it's nothing but it is the evidence of implementation in the product or service as per the requirement of standard, wherein you would have actually wrote the procedure. For example, in any standard, you have an international standard, then you have a quality manual. From the quality manual, you do actually write the procedure. From the procedure, you do the work instruction, and according to the work instruction, you do the work and record in a format. Actually, what happens is when you record the parameters or the requirement in a format, you follow the work instruction. When you follow the work instruction, you are following the procedure. When you follow the procedure, you are following the manual. When you are following the manual, you are actually following the international standard according to the requirement. That is what I actually call it as demonstration. Is everybody clear? Can you actually give me a thumbs up that you are clear on what is the meaning of demonstration? Thank you. So here next, what we have is a critical one: prevention of counterfeit parts. What is the meaning of counterfeit part? It is nothing but a duplicate part, I would say. Duplicate part. See, that needs to be identified at source to ensure that there is no failure of aircraft. That's all, nothing else. It's nothing beyond that. Any counterfeit part, with knowingly or unknowingly, will affect the life of the aircraft, which in turn will lead to disaster. That is the only thing that needs to be prevented. That is the requirement of the standard. For that, you need to have a trained people. You need to have obsolescence control with respect to configuration. You should have approved suppliers. You need to have traceability. And how is that? You verify the or detect the counterfeit parts. You need to have a process in place, and you should monitor it according to your own fixed frequency. Then in case it's a suspected part, how is that you're going to handle? And you need to have risk management in place to identify and control the product which you buy from external service providers with respect to counterfeit parts. That is the requirement of the standard. And also you need to identify special requirements of products and services, and whether you have the capability for the new technology capacity that needs to be identified according to the requirement of the standard. In 8.2.3, we have review of requirement of product and services. It's nothing but the contract review. When you get the PO from the customer, whether it has been reviewed to meet the requirements as per the PO. In the PO, configuration management would have been provided. In the sense, configuration will be provided in the PO that needs to be flown down, verified, and evaluated before taking for the production. That is the requirement of the standard, and whether it is feasible. Even though the PO comes every time, that needs to be understood whether it is possible to produce as per the requirement. Even if it is a series production, is there a change? If there is no change, we can always write there is no change and continue the production. But there must be a contract review for every PO. If there is a schedule agreement, that need not be done. It depends on the requirement of the customer and also the manufacturer. Similarly, for design and development, there are specific requirements where you need to understand what is the development planning, what is the design and development inputs. It is specifically given with respect to material, process, component, equipment, products. Everything input has to be evaluated, and then the output has to be taken and controlled. In the sense, how is the control going to be there? Then what are the outputs? How it will be actually implemented in the process? Like you will have the state drawings, you will have part list, and you will have specifications, define the configuration, and configuration needs to be defined for each process. That needs to be ensured. And we have the process in place to have records for material, process, manufacturing, assembly, handling, packaging, and preservation of product. And data needs to be ensured that the confirming of the product or service is as per the requirement of the customer. Change management is applicable not only for the serial production, it is applicable even during the design and development. How change is managed, what is the criteria, and whether customer will be informed. The changes must include material, process, design, supplier, and key characteristics. In design control, what are the documents to be verified? See, basically, first we need to understand how the product is manufactured, what is the feasibility, what is given to the customer. With respect to whether you are doing a product or sub-assembly or assembly, based on that, we need to verify the document. Example, first you take the drawing, whether all parameter, what is mentioned in the drawing and the tolerance is feasible or not. This one is the design control. Feasibility is the first thing what you need to verify, whether it is possible, feasible to produce. Then whether you have the capable machine to produce, or it may be a machine or requirement of the product depends. For example, when I say plating, whether we have the capability to do the plating as per the requirement. Surface coating, it can be anything. Plating is one example. To say a generic word, surface coating. Likewise, we need to understand whether we will be able to produce as per the requirement, whether it is feasible, whether we have the capability, then we have the capacity, then we have the competency. All the things needs to be verified during the design control. That are from the inputs. What will be the output? Output will be the manufacturing documents. Write your stage drawing. If your input is correct, your output will be obviously correct. In the input, if you have verified with respect to the technical feasibility, with respect to the capability, with respect to the competency, with respect to the supplier, in case you are doing a special process, everything if you have verified, and these are put in a form of technical feasibility document, that is the design control what you will have. Particularly in design control, whether you are able to produce the component as per the print with respect to the tolerance and also the surface requirement as provided by the customer in the drawing. That is the design control what we'll have. Output is nothing but your processing documents, like manufacturing outline specification, which we call it as in aerospace, wherein you will have all the manufacturing documents from stage drawing to final inspection. Entire thing will be given as a package, so that during FAA what you are doing, that will be flown down in the mass production. Are you able to follow me? Is that clear? In design control, what your document needs to be verified, that has been given in the standard. Specifically, what needs to be checked in input, what it needs to be checked during process, and what needs to be checked as output. And also, in case of many of them are not there in services. In case you are there in services also, that needs to be done in the same way. That is explicitly told in the standard how it has to be done. When I say 8.4.1, this is basically for external supplier. How do you control the external supplier? What are the controls needed? We need to have a register, which is that is approval register. We need to have a periodic supplier review, which is nothing but the audit. And we need to have a documented information to ensure compliance and traceability. How is that? You are going to trace the product after it has been delivered to you, and in case you have any issues, backward, upward and downward traceability is maintained. When I say upward, what you buy from the supplier, raw material and suppliers. When I dive downward, when I say with respect to what you actually produce in your process, the upstream and the downstream process traceability is maintained. Here, it specifically talks about the external providers, which is nothing but the suppliers. The entire clause is about suppliers, and it is the organization's responsibility to ensure the requirement is flown down as per the customer requirement. It is not your customer will flow down the requirement. It is your requirement. In case you are working in an organization, you should ensure the requirement is flown down properly, and the conformity, that is COC, is actually received. Conformance of conformity is received from the supplier, and it is signed as per the requirement, which is already established, the FAI. Can I check work transfer in external supplier clause? Of course, you have to check if there is any change. You have received the FAI from a supplier, and that needs to be as per the FAI what is given by the supplier. It cannot get changed. You should look into it, because that is one of the requirements where you will understand the risk is mitigated for your organization, whether he is following the same thing. Are you clear? Can we go to the next? Can I get a response? Okay, we'll go to the next clause. Similarly, for it continues for external suppliers, what is the requirement? And production and service processing, nothing but the production, what is done in the organization. The specific requirements like drawings has to be documented, part list, material, process. It also has to be described how activities is performed. You need to maintain verification documents, is nothing but the records, and how it is monitored. It includes the infrastructure and environment for the process. In case you have a specific requirement that it has to be done in a temperature control process, that also needs to be ensured. That is the requirement of the standard. And in case of special process, you can refer to the next clause. The same thing needs to be followed for the special process. The production process continues, wherein you need to establish criteria for workmanship. That is, you should have a representative samples or a written standard, and also you need to maintain the account. It is nothing but the counting, to ensure that no non-coming product is mixed with the good product. And how are you identifying critical items, and how it is being measured, and how it is being monitored, and the evidence needs to be produced during the customer audit or system audit for all the verification what is done as per your process, what is defined in your manufacturing outline document or your PFD or your control plan. One more control is specifically mentioned is the foreign object. The place what you produce does not have any inclusion of foreign objects, and how it is controlled, what is the method, whether they are aware of foreign objects presence. Everything has to be demonstrated during the audit, and also that needs to be prevented, detected, and removed. And what is the process involved also needs to be demonstrated. Similarly, for control of equipments, for special process, and how do you verify the parts already produced? That is, you need to have a risk assessment. You need to do the first part inspection. You can see a representative item from the first part production run or a new part. That is, setup process has to be clearly defined and documented it, including the tooling what you're going to use. And if you do any changes, that also needs to be documented. It can be an engineering change, it can be a process change, it can be a tooling change. The entire process is called a first article inspection. And if there is a change, you need to do a delta FAI. When I say change, it can be anything. Any change after FAI is submitted to the customer needs to have a delta FAI and needs to be approved. That is the requirement of the standard. And how is that you're going to verify? That also need to be have a documented information. When I say documented information, it can be a procedure, it can be a working section or anything, but that needs to be documented information to show the evidence of implementation. It is left to the organization what is the document. It does not define how to do it. Then specific, we have identification and traceability. In some cases where the safety part is there, it should have a serial continuous number which needs to be identified so that any part which is non-conforming can be identified and distinguished and taken back. That is the recall process which can be done in case of any issues. The entire requirement is defined in the standard which you can go through. But this is the additional requirement with respect to EASA. Apart from ISO 9000, where the traceability is a requirement, here it is specifically given with respect to, for example, somebody was saying AAM, maintain a register who holds the stamp or signature. This is one of the requirements, which is identification and traceability from incoming to FG. We should be able to trace back specific authorized individual supporting the broader AS 9100 requirement for product conformity and traceability. That is what the standard says. See, basically in traceability, this is the additional requirement. One of the requirement is that we need to trace back the authorized individual who has done the process. Nothing but the stamp. You should have a traceability of a stamp usage, and that should be traceable when there is a feedback from the customer in case of problem. Next is the, am I clear? Sujit, can I get a feedback? Okay then. Hope you are clear. Next is the preservation. The part produced should not deteriorate till it reaches the customer, whether it is external object or internal foreign object, it should not be affected. That is the responsibility of the supplier or the organization who is supplying to the customer. That is the requirement of the standard. The preservation has to ensure FIFO, shelf life, and FOD. These are the major three requirements. And there should be no hazardous materials present. This is the regulatory requirement. So in case of any customer complaints, we need to have analysis, provide all technical documentation as required by the customer. We need to have controls on the product already supplied and also what you're going to have as a containment action. The customer needs to be support for every query with respect to warranties, spare parts, anything. This not only happens in manufacturing environment, this also applies to a service like a MRO. This is change control as per the standard requirement. Any changes needs to be controlled. And only designated shelf, it is not shelf life, it is shelf life. When I say shelf life, for example, oil, it can be the shelf life on oil is only 1 year, and after that it cannot be used, which will be mentioned in the technical data sheet which is provided by the oil supplier. Or you have a coolant. If the shelf life is only 2 years, it cannot be used beyond that. That is the meaning of shelf life, that is SHELF. It is not the shelf life. Yes, SHELF. The control of changes has to be done according to the requirement of the standard, where you need to have evidence of implementation, and any change has to be controlled. That is the meaning of this, including process, production, tools, softwares, exactly, manufacturing date and expiry date. Here, more importance is given in to the expiry date than the manufacturing date. Then control of non-conforming products. Sorry, I've exceeded my time. Maybe I'll take another 10 minutes. Control of non-conforming product needs to be ensured that it is contained, responsibility is defined, reporting is done, corrective actions taken, and the entire thing to be documented, and it needs to be retrieved during the audit. It may also, any interested parties during any complaint, that also needs to be ensured that it is recorded and kept, so that it can be verified during any recall by customers, distributor, or regulatory authority in case of any disaster. Controlling of non-conforming products is continued. In case of you want to use as is, that also needs to be applied for approval to your customer. In case you have found out a non-conformity, you want to use it, needs to get approved by the customer. And in case you want to scrap it, that also needs to be clearly marked, damaged, and then only destroyed. It cannot be just thrown as is condition, so that it does not go as a counterfeit part to some other supplier and it is sold in the market. That is the purpose of it. Then comes the 9.1.2 customer satisfaction. It is specifically given service or product conformity, on-time delivery, with nothing but the delivery. When I say conformity, whether all 100% lot is through. In case of complaints, what is the number of complaints and how many corrective action requests, that needs to be monitored and reviewed in MRM. If you have customer scorecard, that also will be audited by the certifying body, and that needs to be tabulated and kept, and any where you find the score less than the target, that also needs to be provided as an action plan and implemented. And you should have the improvement plans, and that needs to be demonstrated. And you should also demonstrate that customer is actually satisfied rather than showing on the records. So how do you do that? You should have any record setting that yes, there is improvement from last customer satisfaction to this. In case customer is not willing to give also, your customer complaint is reduced, your on-time delivery is up, your 100% lot expansion is done, and all corrective action given is acknowledged and demonstrated by the customer. That itself will show you that there is an improvement, and that can be demonstrated. That's the requirement of the standard in clause 9.1.2. So 9.1.3 is analysis and evaluation. It can be the supplier, it can be internal. You need to evaluate and analyze all your KPI, what is required by the standard, and take corrective action, including the risks, issues with respect to safety, reliability, compliance, supporting an effective evaluation and improvement to be demonstrated according to the requirement of standard. Nothing but you should have, in case you have your own internal target, that needs to be analyzed, and there should be action plan which should show improvement. Here comes the internal audit. Basically, here what it says is the regulatory and statutory and regulatory requirement needs to be incorporated in all customer requirements. That is the requirement of EASA. What it means, it needs to look into indicators, what is each process, what you have defined, whether it is controlled, it is meeting the planned results, whether it is improving over time, whether customer is satisfied, and it is aligned with organizational objectives. What does it mean? You would have defined what is your KPI with respect to the requirement of the standard for each process, whether KPI is met and whether KPI is aligned as per the requirement of the standard and organization, and whether it is monitored, and whether it is meeting the planned result, and whether customer is satisfied with your monitoring. All these needs to be audited, and in case during audit you find any action being taken, and whether this is being reviewed in your MRM, and whether on-time delivery is also reviewed in MRM is additional requirement with respect to A standard. It is not a optional, it is a requirement of the standard that your on-time delivery to your customer to be monitored and reviewed in MRM, which is chaired by the top management. That is the requirement of the standard. Here, what is the requirement is that your non-conformity, whether you are improving your non-conformity, what is happening during the process, whether you are taking action, there is a reducing trend, and any corrective action taken, whether it is flown down to the process or just given to the customer for the sake of giving, or it has been flown down as the action requirements, whether the required documents are updated, whether the updated documents is implemented, whether the implemented action is giving result, whether the result is having a downward trend, that needs to be demonstrated when you say improvement. And whether the action what is taken is effective is also needs to be demonstrated through trend. It should be a data, not just a description that like for example, we have implemented that control plan and the product rejection is reduced. This is a statement. What needs to be done is we have implemented the action which was having 100 ppm reduced to 80 ppm. That will be the improvement point. And how did you do it? We have analyzed the during the in aerospace they call it as quality clinic. Performed as per schedule, then any corrective action required when by MR. See, as per schedule, whatever you do is okay. What is the net result of it? In the sense, what is the KPI, what you have defined, and what is actually being seen in the trend? It should be in numbers. It should be, we should be able to analyze and show it as a trend that the process or product, there is an improvement which is demonstrated in terms of data. It can be over a year also, that's not an issue. The requirement here is that you need to demonstrate that there is an improvement. For example, in any manufacturing process or service, there will be a non-conformance identified. Whether that non-conformance in that process is being reduced, there will be a rejection. Whether that rejection is repetitive or it is not happening, it is at the same state or reduced. Even same state is an improvement, but it cannot increase. That is the requirement of the standard. And the entire thing to be documented, and you need to demonstrate what is the documented information, how the continual improvement will happen in the organization, and how it will be monitored. That needs to be clearly defined in the document as per the definition of in your document that needs to be demonstrated. Am I clear? Okay then. Then next is the retained documented information. We have talked enough about this. This is nothing but the record in aerospace, not only in aerospace, in any automotive or even ISO for a customer. Because I have actually worked in toys aerospace, automotive, and including consumer, electrical, electronics, wherever I worked. This retained documentation is a requirement with respect to, it can be minimum or maximum, it does not matter. But according to the requirement of the standard, wherever they have put retained information or a customer specific requirement. When I say customer specific requirement, the customer informs that they require this document during the FI that needs to be maintained. Whether even if it is not mentioned in the standard, if the customer requires beyond the standard, that needs to be followed. Whether the organization likes it or not, whether they have the capability or competency. Yeah, that is actually, if you say retention period, it is actually not 10 years. I think for Airbus, it is 15 years or end of the product. I'm just telling an example. As somebody is already telling customer specific requirement, generally it will be the end of the life of product. 40 years for flight safety, because the flight will be running with the help of MRO for 40 years. So when you produce a part, that part has to be reliable for that many. Yes, exactly. It is not that 40 years alone, it is the customer specific requirement. In case the tier one takes the responsibility and gives you 15 years, it's absolutely okay. He takes the assembly requirement for 40 years after his testing. For you, if you are a tier N, the last N, it is okay. But generally, as somebody mentioned, 40 years is the requirement, and that is to have a system in place for 40 years better rather than not having it, which will be safe for the organization. So this is just an example. Already, if you have a certified, you need to have such. In case you want to go, management decides to go, prepare a quality management, implement system and monitor same, internal audit, corrective action, self certification body, pass the audit. This only a 4-line which I given for reference. Actually, you need to put also the MRM in place. One MRM needs to be conducted, and there will be a stage 1 audit where it will be done for the documentation, and stage 2 audit for the implementation. Stage 1 is called the adequacy. Stage 2 is all the conformance. So this one is only for understanding. In case life with AS, lesson reliance on paper records, increase employees awareness of process of monitoring, increase efficiency of data analysis and process improvement, increase in employees involvement and motivation. There are pitfalls also. Some OEMs ask for additional requirement and specific audits, which is the qualification audit, where Airbus does for every qualification, they come and do the audit. Even Boeing does that. Any OEM or tier 1 also does the qualification audit, which is the mandatory requirement. And also we have the NADCAP audit, which will be referred by the OEM or the tier 1, that the supplier needs to get the approval of NADCAP. It depends on the OEM. So this is a typical subject mastery slide. Major NC, you broke the system. Minor NC, you misstep it. OFI, not guilty, but you act together. Here the only, has said very clearly, the only rule is evidence. So when I said documented retained information, that is the evidence. Yeah, with this we have come to the end of the session. Do you have any questions? Open to questions. Sorry, it got delayed by 20 minutes. Madam, can you unmute or can I do that?
Yes, sir. Just 1 sec.
Please go ahead with your questions.
Done.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Namaste, sir. Hello. Hello, sir.
Yes, Vikas, you are audible. Sir, you are
Yes,
on
sir.
mute. Sir, you are on mute.
Unmute, right? Yeah. Sir, Sreenivasan, sir.
Yes, tell me.
I have a doubt that I have heard that in the next revision of the IA 9100, so there is one news that management representative, that word will be removed, sir. So what do you think about it, sir?
See, actually, in automotive, they already removed it.
Yes, correct.
So they might remove, because here the requirement initially for management representative in the AA standard, why they retained, I'll tell you. Here,
Yes.
the requirement is that the management representative collates all the data and he interacts with the top management and the users to ensure that the improvement is in place and the configuration is maintained. In case of any non-conformance with respect to the internal audit, it is corrected and demonstrated that it is maintained. Now, actually, if they are going to remove that, the word only will be removed, but organizations will continue to use it.
Right, sir.
So actually, the standard says when you say documented information and retained documents, these two, what the standard says, that will be forcing you to do that.
Yes.
You will not have the option whether to have the MR, not to have the MR. One person will be doing it or the process owner will do it. The standard will not tell who has to do it. That is the organization responsibility to ensure that roles and responsibilities are defined and their roles is understood. A KPI is defined according to the requirement of standard, and that KPI is actually monitored, improved.
Yes.
That is the only requirement. It may be removed, but I'm not sure. But there is a requirement that it will be removed because automotive is removed. See what aerospace does. It actually follows the automotive. See, following automotive will be more difficult when compared to aerospace. Aerospace basically relies on most on documents and qualification, I would say, not only documents. In the sense, the process has to demonstrate the print requirement. That is the only thing.
Yes.
Once you know your product in aerospace, it is easy to manage. Initially, it will be difficult. See, I was in ACAS for around 4 years.
Okay.
Now ACAS has gone public.
Right.
They have around 350 machines. So when we started in ACAS, till now there are around 12 quality managers have been changed.
We know, sir.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Welcome.
Quality manager does not know. What happens is the corrective action is taken by the management to ensure that the non-conformances are not repeated. Finally, it comes to the monitoring process. And here, the Great Wall of China is QA. Of course, he will tell that this is not okay. But the correcting the process by stopping the process and getting the empower from the management is a difficult task. Because any organization, the organization started for making the business, not stopping the business. The challenge here is how do you implement this? Once you implement the standard with letter and spirit, it is possible to ensure the product is actually as per the requirement of the customer. See, we have also come across, we have developed from 100% inspection to sampling by proving that the process is capable beyond 1.67.
Correct.
We have done that. Even with Honeywell, we have done that. But where the tolerances are very close, for example, it is only 10 microns. or the process you are not able to measure. It is a surface
Mhm.
coating where you are not able to measure 100%. There, we need to ensure that the process is consistent with respect to the monitoring of the process requirement, like your temperature, your bath, your, for example, sharpening, ball size of and timing. That has to be controlled, and that needs to be demonstrated. So coming back to your question, whether MR is required or not, it does not matter to your organization.
Mhm.
Anybody, any other question?
Sir, one more question, sir, from my side, sir. So please don't mind asking
No issues.
asking
You can
again, sir.
ask. I have
Yeah,
time. I experienced my time. I'm
yes,
just
sir. Sir, one more question is like I have heard that in September 2026 or like late October, there will be an revision to ISO 9001 2015. So, will it
ISO
impact to the same
2026 is going
case?
to come.
Yes, yes, yes. So, will it immediately
No, there will
lead
be a time
to
frame.
revision of ES 9100, sir?
Yes, there will be a revision, but it will not be immediate.
Okay, okay.
No, there will be they will revise it and give you a
Yes.
timeline to switch over.
Okay, okay, okay,
But they
okay.
will also give you a deadline.
Okay.
In 2016 IATF, when they did that, they told
Uh,
by 2018 or something, all has to get migrated, all the certificates
mhm.
invalid.
Okay.
That kind of deadline will be given. For example, I'm taking an automotive example because that is easy to understand. VD,
Yes.
VDA, FMEA. Now you tell whether we have to follow it or not.
Sir, the more thing is people or industry, we are still following AIAG manual only, sir, rather than AIAG VDS standard. Why? Because that is
So that is a
fair
seven
enough
step
and
process.
friendly, sir, to use.
That is a 7 step process. The process needs
Yes,
to be
yes,
understood by every individual. Then it
correct,
has to be implemented and
correct.
understood what is the risk mitigation. That is the what is the
Mm,
risk what is involved and what is the
mm,
mitigation with respect to detection as well as the occurrence.
correct. Mm,
So that
mm,
7 step has to be evolved in the organization.
correct, sir.
That will be taking time. By 2027 or 2027 mid, they will force.
Mm, mm, mm. Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. Fine, sir.
Not a
Thank you,
issue.
sir.